that's a big part for
Mhm.
us as human beings, let alone as leaders, people who have influence and impact in any environment. It always begins from the position of accepting the fact that we live in a world that we cannot control.
Oh, that's
We
so good.
we have so much influence and impact, but we don't have control over the world. It took me years to realize I can't control them. I have influence, I have impact. I don't have control over them, but I do have control over one thing.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Eric Pfeiffer about how to operate well as a leader despite the increasing pressure leaders face. Eric is the founder and CEO of MPWR Coaching. Eric has been in the leadership development space for over 15 years, having helped build a multi-million-dollar coaching business and trained over 150 coaches worldwide. He founded MPWR Coaching in 2019 to expand his efforts to unlock leaders' potential so they can grow their organizations and teams in new, never imagined ways. He is known for creating one of the only leadership operating systems available today, which empowers the true engine of any business, the people. He has published 2 life-transforming books, Leadership Gravitas and Transform Your Trajectory, each introducing simple tools that give leaders a competitive advantage to any context. Eric speaks and leads out of the overflow of his own journey. He is a fierce practitioner of what he teaches and is committed to becoming a better version of himself daily. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Eric. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So Eric, you and I have very similar callings, just kind of looking at your work, looking at your books, looking at kind of how you're serving. We both have a heart for helping leaders who are absolutely overwhelmed. They are struggling in their leadership positions and they don't know how to get out of that valley of overwhelm. So I really just want to give you a huge high five and say thank you. There you go. Thank you for the work you're doing to support leaders, because leadership is hard. It just is. Leaders are trying their best to get results within their organizations, but they're also dealing with those, and you all know it, you feel it, those daily fires, the endless drama, and then of course that all of that dysfunction that happens in our organizations. So Eric, talk to us. How do you help leaders step confidently into all of that dysfunction, into all of that chaos, so that we operate well despite the increasing pressures that we face?
That is not only true, your assessment of what many people are experiencing, whether I'm working with, high-level executives or owners of very large organizations, all the way down to, more entrepreneurial mom and pop shop size businesses. I tell people business is hard, but let's back up even a little bit further. Life is hard. And so when we're talking about developing as leaders and learning how to overcome all of the unique challenges that we're facing in the workplace, thankfully, I discovered this many years ago. It's the same skills and practices that we need to be able to overcome those same things in every area of our life. Right. So whether we're engaging in our home life and our friendship and our extended family and the different hobbies we're involved in, as people, we are constantly facing situations where we're under pressure. Things aren't going our way. Life rarely unfolds the way we expect or want it to. We're constantly getting thrown curveballs. And so I mean, just open the news any night, on television, and you find, 10 new things. You're like, what is going on? Everything's going to heck in a handbasket. And I tell people, well, welcome to humanity. Welcome to life. Life is hard because not everything unfolds according to our expectations. I think that's a big part for us as human beings, let alone as leaders, people who have influence and impact in any environment. It always begins from the position of accepting the fact that we live in a world that we cannot control.
Oh, that's so good.
We have so much influence and impact, but we don't have control over the world. I wake up every day next to an amazing woman who I've been married to for 23 years, and it's taking me almost that long to realize I cannot control this other human being. I've got 2 grown children who are now, well, they're in college, 21 and 19. It took me years to realize I can't control them. I have influence, I have impact. I don't have control over them, but I do have control over one thing, and that is my attitudes and my behaviors, the way that I interpret, understand the world, and respond to the world is actually my superpower. And I think, like many of us as leaders, coaches, as consultants, for a lot of us, we're drawing so much of how we partner and serve leaders today by drawing from our own journey, our own experience, our own struggles. And I tell people, I can go back to the season of my life when I was so frustrated by so many different, I was a young husband, a young father, a young business leader, trying to navigate so much complexity and just always overwhelmed, always frustrated, feeling like, man, if the world would just do what I want it to do, then everything would be okay. And, I'm waiting on the world to change, as John Mayer says in one of his songs. And then it was actually a mentor who helped me to wake up to the fact that, like, hey, buddy, you're going to be waiting the rest of your life for the world to conform to your expectations. And so if you're going to make yourself hostage, if you're going to make your sense of a peace, identity, acceptance, approval, significance, purpose, all these things that we're desperately looking for, if you're going to make the world responsible for the things that are most important to who you are as a human being, then you've imprisoned yourself. And here's the worst part. You're sitting in prison and the key's in your pocket. And I remember that was so powerful for me. And that was the season of my life where I began to wake up to this whole idea that, like, hey, the only thing I can be in control of is my attitudes, my behaviors, and how I respond and engage the world, but not the way the world is behaving toward me. And that literally was a form of freedom that I think, really transformed my trajectory. No pun intended. That is the title of one of my recent books. But it really did transform my trajectory and allowed me to learn how to operate from a place of significant freedom, clarity, confidence, courage. Anyways, all that long-windedness to say, that's what I'm passionate about. That's to address the question you were asking earlier, that life is not going to get more calm. Life is not going to get easier. Life is not going to become less chaotic or crazy or unpredictable. But how we operate and how we experience ourselves and engage the world can become more predictable, more peaceful, less chaotic. And that's what I'm excited about.
I love it. I feel like you just took us to therapy. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I need to stand up and say, hello, my name is Bethany and I'm a control freak.
Well, join the party, Bethany.
I've been trying to control the world and the industry and all these things, and I just can't, because as you were saying, the answer is with us. It's how we show up. It's internal. It's our attitude. It's how we engage. Can't control out there. We can only control the internal side of it. So that in and of itself is a word. So I cannot wait to dive into all the other things that you have to share. Speaking of trajectory, so you've written 2 books and they're both absolutely amazing. One is, I got to read you the subtitles too, guys, because the subtitles just, yes, that's what we need. The first book was Leadership Gravitas, 12 Essential Skills to Expand Your Impact and Influence. And this year you've published the Transform Your Trajectory with the subtitle of How to Turn Your Most Challenging Moments into Life-Changing Breakthroughs. And everybody in the audience said, yes, please. Help us. How do we transform all of those challenges into actual life-changing breakthroughs? So I really want to start with your new book first, because I feel like we all feel that, right? After we admit that we're control freaks, we can't control the world, it starts with us. How do we take that chaos and all those challenges and actually have breakthrough with it?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously the book unpacks anything I'm going to say with greater depth. We have an online course, all that kind of fun stuff. But years ago, I was mentored by an amazing leader who taught me the value of developing, creating, innovating on visual tools. We're a visual people, right? We remember things by visual signs. If I draw a big yellow M on a whiteboard and I say, what is that? Everyone says McDonald's. If I draw a green circle with a kind of, siren in the middle, they got Starbucks. If I draw 4 circles interlocking, side by side, that's Audi. As human beings, we are image-based creatures. We remember so much by visual. And so he taught me the value of developing these visual tools that allow us to take the best, most helpful leadership principles, life principles that we've learned over the years, and we attach those principles to these simple visual tools to make them more memorable, accessible, and applicable. So that's what these books really are. They're just an unpacking of some of the tools in our core leadership toolkit, which we call a leadership operating system. So that's the context, but this particular book unpacks one of our key tools called the Kairos circle. So when people ask me, I say, well, gosh, Eric, how do you engage life so that life you're dealing with life and life is not dealing with you? How do we identify the moments that are worth wrestling with, that we believe breakthrough is on the other side? And I tell them the first order of business is we have to identify the kairos moments of our life. And kairos is a Greek word that is literally a word for time. There's chronos, chronological time. That's where we get chronological time from. And there's the word kairos. And the Greeks were wise enough to know that we needed two words for time. There's linear time, that's calendar time. You can't stop it. It doesn't pause for you. It's happening whether you like it or not. But Kairos time is recognizing the significant moments in our life when we're having an experience that is impacting us. And so a Kairos moment is any experience that impacts us mentally, emotionally, or physically. And we're so hurried through our days. We're so busy getting on to the next thing on our to-do list that very rarely do we slow down and take stock of, gosh, what have I experienced today or this week or this month or whatever that has really been impactful? Because if we've had an impactful experience, there's a reason why it was impacting for us, which means there's probably something to learn. And it could be a positive experience. It could be a challenging experience. It could be a big experience. It could be a little experience. So the first order of business I tell people is in all that you're going through, we have to learn to slow down and to pay attention to the experiences of our life that are having an impact for a reason. And then what do we do with those Kairos moments? Well, we give people, it's literally in the form of a circle, we give people a simple 6-step process to learn how to excavate the learning, the wisdom, the insights, the gold that is available in all of our life experiences. The problem is, in our kind of traditional North American education system, we've taught people that learning is about information acquisition and regurgitation, maybe with a little bit of synthesis. And the problem is people leave college and we stop learning. Maybe we read books and podcasts, but if you ask somebody, hey, from that book that you're reading, tell me the one most impactful thing, tell me what you've learned from it, and tell me what you're planning to do to integrate that learning into your life. And they'll look at you like with deer in the headlights, right? We go to conferences, we listen to podcasts on the way to work, but very rarely do we know how to actually squeeze the learning. We're getting information, we're getting content, right? We're consuming so much these days. But here's a great analogy. If we don't know how to metabolize what we're consuming, just like our body has this natural, unbelievable ability to metabolize the things that we consume, food and drink, to be able to extract the nutrients that strengthens, energizes, brings health to our bodies, and to flush the toxins, then we'd be dead.
Yeah.
And we don't realize often as people, as leaders, that our learning trajectory has it's dead. It's fallen off a cliff because we've not learned a simple way to metabolize the content that we're consuming or the life experiences that we're consuming that would allow us to receive strength and energy and nutrition for our life. And so that's what this tool does. 6-step process teaches them to observe what the heck is going on, to interpret why did I respond this way? Why did it impact me? Why did things turn out the way they do? And then to discover what is there to learn about myself, about the situation? How do I need to potentially reframe the way I'm viewing the situation so that I can see life happening for me rather than against me? And then how am I going to respond? What's my plan of response? Who's going to help me in this or partner with me? And then I got to get on and practice. So again, that's a quick run around the circle or the Kairos circle or the tool. But like I tell people, I said, if you do not have an intentional way to metabolize your life experiences for growth, transformation, for development, for maturity, then guess what? You're probably not experiencing those things.
So many thoughts about that. But first, I just want to start with the statement of kind of the summary is we have so much access to knowledge and information, and yet we are no wiser than we were before.
A
Because
hundred percent.
wisdom is taking that knowledge and gaining insight and understanding how to apply it in various, circumstances and things like that. And so we're not necessarily gaining wisdom, but what you're talking about is so countercultural to American culture specifically. And I even think some other cultures, we are never still. We are so busy. And
Yeah,
then if we're not busy actually accomplishing something, we are distracted with lots of entertainment, lots of social media, or, binge watching things. And so all of those questions that, you said we need to reflect on, gosh, I feel like we've got to stop and say, build time in your day to just
that's
stop.
right.
Like what you're saying, stop, remove the distractions, be still, and take a hot second to think about your day
That's
so
right.
that you can turn
That's right.
information into wisdom.
That's right.
Woo! So, how in the world are we going to change this culture, Eric? How are we going to go forth and say, guys, let's do things differently?
Yeah. Well, it's a big question, but I really do believe it begins with simple practices, simple routines, simple what we call predictable patterns that we can put in place. So with all the leaders that I work with, I always challenge them when we're going through this tool, and I say, listen, if you don't practice this, then it's a waste of your time. And so if you really want to become a lifelong learner, if you want to operate with a growth mindset, people think of a growth mindset as kind of a posture. I'm like, nah, 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 nah. I've had enough of it. We just need the right posture. What we need are the right practices that will actually move the needle in an area of our life. So what I tell people is it starts with literally on your calendar, you're going to put in 30 minutes, twice a week, once a week, 3 times a week, pardon me, where you're going to take time to slow down. And it's this simple. What's the big thing that grabbed your attention from today, from yesterday, from this week? How did it impact you? And again, the tool kind of helps people do this very simply. You're just going to take it around the circle, right? It's no different than, we don't go and do a big swim or a big workout after eating a big meal. We understand that our body needs a little bit of time to metabolize the food, right? To digest it. In the same way, until we begin to take learning seriously and put some of these practices into place, then things won't change. And the beautiful thing is that the clients I work with are people who are tired of the same old, same old. They want to see, the needle move in areas of their life. And so they're committed to doing it. And I tell people, I am who I am today, not because I did one big thing, but because I have learned over the years to adopt small, sometimes what feel like meaningless or insignificant routines in my life that over time have cultivated radical transformation.
Consistency will beat out occasionally all day long.
All day long.
And I love what you're talking about, the practice. Just thinking about the word, oftentimes we can think about sports, how you go to practice to, play out and move your body, hopefully get that muscle memory before you go into something. And muscle memory, y'all, it's not just sports, that's also, in musical things as well and artistic things. That it takes practice. I love what you were saying. Schedule your priority. If learning is a priority that you want in your life, you don't automatically have the habit of it. You have to
Right.
practice, show up every day, schedule that, show up, and then it'll start to become more memory, that muscle memory, that thought memory of this is how I
Yeah.
learn from each moment in my life.
Yeah,
It's
it's so
so
good.
good. So good. And so in thinking about the transform your trajectory, and please say that word again, because I know that's probably new to us. Kairos, is that how you say it?
Kairos. Yeah,
Kairos.
Kairos is the way we spell it in English. Some people say Kairos, some people say Kairos, tomato, tomato.
Totally. And I love it. The Greek word for just time, not linear time, but at the right time. And so much of what we go through, I think about how leaders have seasons. Think about how you start your job as an individual contributor, whatever industry you're in, right? You're hired as an employee and you're learning some sort of skill set. And that skill set is so important as you learn that, as you learn to apply it, guess what? It's going to be used in the next season of whatever it is that you're called to, and then the next, and then the next. You don't automatically have everything at one time. It is tied to that consistency of learning. And
Yeah.
then you're going to start saying, hey man, I have quite a toolbox or a tool belt of a lot of tools that I've learned over the years. And I think so often we like that easy button of I can get it all and get it all now. I should know as a new leader. That's when we have imposter syndrome. I should know how to do this. I should know how to do everything. It, the day before you're hired or your promotion is announced, you're actually not smarter the next day.
That's right.
You're the same person from yesterday, whenever you didn't have the title, to today you have the title. Like nothing magically, no fairy came and went, you're magically smarter. You have all these skill sets. And so, what you're talking about, that trajectory, is so important. If you want to go higher with your knowledge and skills, you have to learn how to learn. I love it so much. And as an educator, I love it even more. And so talk to us more about the trajectory of how do we implement this so that we can learn those tools to be better leaders.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. I was working with this client. He's the president of a, $500 million company, and here in the States. And, when we first started working together, he was feeling overwhelmed. He was experiencing, interestingly enough, he was experiencing a lot of what we now call imposter syndrome, which, in my mind is a fancy way to talk about insecurities, self-doubt. But he was dealing with all these things, even as a high-level executive, very successful. But he was dealing with all these internal questions and frustrations. And so when introduced him to the Kairos Circle, and he committed to, in the beginning, just once a week, he'd be willing to slow down for 30 minutes in his calendar and to identify what's the top 3 Kairoses that he's experienced that week, and to take one and to process it around the circle. And, the first week or two, I said, how did it go? And he said, oh, it was okay. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure I got a lot out of it. Okay. By week 3 and 4, he said, oh, it's interesting. I had some interesting insights that came up, things I hadn't really thought of before. I was able to reframe my perspective on a situation here at work, and oh, okay, no big deal. And then by week 7 and 8, it was like, hey, it was interesting. I was at home and my wife and I got into a discussion and I got really frustrated, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is one of those Kairos moments. And so I just paused right there. I didn't have my journal with me. And so I just paused right there and started taking this argument that we'd gotten to around the circle. I thought, oh, that's interesting. By week 12 and 13, 14, it was unbelievable. It was like every week, he was no longer just processing one Kairos during that 30-minute calendar time. He had discovered that processing Kairos, or identifying and processing Kairos moments, had become just a way of life for him, right? As these predictable patterns often do, they just become a way that we do things. And he was now starting, instead of having just one maybe small insight, that it was a compounding effect where he was accumulating multiple insights. He was starting to see the connection between different areas of his life, where his attitudes and behaviors were really helpful and beneficial and leading to great outcomes, and where they potentially weren't. And he was starting to see a significant trajectory shift in the way that he viewed himself, the way he engaged his life. And it was literally, it wasn't even like a straight kind of diagonal line. It was like almost like a U curve where it kind of continued to ascend more and more vertically. And I remember probably 6 months in, and, I've been working with him now for about 1.5 years, but 6 months in, he just said, Eric, I would never have believed it, but I feel like today I understand when you talk about wisdom, because that's the way I define this in our book, is that we all know academic learning. We need to learn wisdom learning. And he said, I would have always balked at that and said, nah, wisdom, that's just Confucianism, and that's just, a fortune cookie phrase. But he said, I feel like I have grown in wisdom over the last 6 months. And he said, I just feel so much more equipped, prepared. I feel so much more internally clear and confident in the way I'm engaging different areas of my life than I did 6 months ago or even 3 months ago. And all of that is the compounding effect of, learning on top of learning on top of learning in the way we're talking about it.
I love it. It's, and I'm not a mathematical person, but it's exponential growth.
It is.
And it's so important. And I love what you're saying. Everything about, that story about that gentleman leading this massive company was not, hey, I went out and found this cool process tool, this, plug and play system or whatever. It was so internal for him of, I stuck with it. The first couple of weeks was kind of awkward. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I learned a little something from, even trying to identify what is a significant moment, to, okay, what did I learn from this? To, oh my gosh, I feel wise. And now I know how to lead and be a better steward of, what I've been given. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we got to shoot for as leaders. And I feel like we do so often look externally for solutions to our challenges.
Yeah.
And you were just hitting the nail on the head, as far as I'm concerned, is it starts with the internal introspection, the reflection, and gaining
Yeah.
that wisdom so that you can take it and apply it to the next situation and the
Yes.
next.
A
And
hundred
that is that
percent.
exponential growth. Oh, it's so good.
Well, and most leaders or organizations, or it's usually a person in the organization, when they come to me, I would say 98% of the time they're coming to me to complain and lament over what's going on in their organization and their team and the board and an executive group and amongst the divisional leaders, whatever. It's always they're the problem.
Yeah. Victim mentality.
And very quickly, what I tell them is I say, listen, of course they all have problems because they're human beings and they're all on their own growth journey and they all got strengths and weaknesses. So let's pause though for a second. The change that you want to see in your organization has to begin with you.
Oh, yes.
Because you're the leader and you define the culture. And so if the organization is operating in ways that you feel like are dysfunctional, toxic, unhelpful, counter effective, I said, guess what? For better and for worse, you are responsible for the success of your organization. You are also responsible for its weaknesses and shortcomings. I said, so if you want that to change, you've got to change yourself first. And they always say, oh my gosh, you kidding me? And they have excuses. But the bravest, the courageous leaders, what they do is they come and they say, okay, you know what? If I have to go first, so be it. And then they embark on this journey. And once they begin to experience the radical transformation away from projecting responsibility outwardly, taking personal responsibility, as they begin to learn some of these simple skills, which quite frankly, this whole leadership operating system that I've developed is really the stuff that I wish I had learned and had been trained in, when I was in high school, college, in my earlier years. It would have saved me so much unnecessary heartache, right? Because life is hard and we're going to have to struggle. But I do believe that with the right tools, the right practices, the right partnership, coaching, consulting, parenting, teaching, coaching, whatever, I do believe that we can not only expedite the learning process, but make it a little bit more enjoyable and achieve greater heights more quickly. And so I have, my 21 and my 19-year-old, my clients are always shocked to hear like, oh, they know our tools. They've been trained in these tools because these are the tools my wife and I utilize in our household, in our marriage, and the way we raise our kids. These are the tools I use. This is not just like hey, for executive leaders in the corporate world, these are some cool tricks. It's like, no, these are the framework of principles and practices that I have lived my life by. And which is why I tell people, my life is far from perfect or ideal, but the proof of the pudding is in my life. It is in my marriage. It is in my parenting. It is in my own health. It is in my finances, because these are the things that I've utilized. And so I tell people, if this smells good, looks good, if you want what I'm experiencing, the benefits, then this is for you. And so my two kids are literally, people meet my kids, and they have kids their age or older, and they say, what did you give them? What did you feed them? Because they operate fundamentally with a much greater degree of what we call leadership gravitas, which is this internal sense of security, this sense of internal significance. You can feel it. They're just not easily moved by the ever-changing environment and opinions and perspectives and technologies and everything that they're immersed in. They kind of have a sense of gravitas, like they're not easily moved. And people say, how did that happen? I said, because thankfully I was able, and my wife and I together really were able to train them in the ways that I wished I had been trained when I was their age.
I love that so much and that's one of the things that we talk about, right? We talk about how you can thrive professionally and personally. Everything is connected. Great leadership skills and insights and wisdom is universal. It can be applied anywhere and everywhere with every
Yes.
relationship. And I do feel like so often we put it in a bucket of this is me at work and this is what I do. And then we don't necessarily become or act the same when we're at home. We see it as a different bucket. And I love, love, love that everything that you're doing is based upon those universal principles and practices that can be applied no matter the age, no matter the title,
Yeah.
no matter the
Yeah.
group. And that's so important. Can you imagine, like what you're talking about, if you had these tools, earlier in your career, how different it would be? And so everybody listening, we've talked about a couple of examples of people leading organizations, but what if you're in charge of nobody but a spreadsheet? That's okay.
Yeah.
Lead yourself. Everything starts with you,
That's
because the
right.
first thing you're going to experience is not only, I love that gravitas, that just confidence, an unmoved way in society. Lord, we know it's trying to push you every which way, to and fro, constant, right? But you could stand there more confident, but also, man, you're going to have a lot more fun and joy, internal joy along the way. And who doesn't want that? We all want
That's
that, and
right.
we want it for our kids, and I love it. I love that you teach it to your kids. And guys, go pick up this book. You've got to work through this. So you mentioned the leadership gravitas. I do want to transition to that too. Talk to us about that book. I know you kind of mentioned it briefly with your kids, but why do we need to read this book? What's in there that's going to help us operate well despite the pressures that we face as leaders?
Yeah. So, in my earlier years, and this is obviously hindsight, so I'm able to articulate it better. Back then, I was just, clueless and running around like a chicken with my head cut off, grasping for who was I and where did I fit in the world and what does it mean for me to be successful. And along that way, I'm so grateful for many mentors, just people that were a few steps ahead of me. They weren't even always much older than me, but just people who were willing to share their journey. They weren't there to give me answers. They were just there to say, hey, this is what I've been through. This is what I've learned. This is what's worked for me. I'm so grateful for all of those folks who have had that impact on my life. And I continue to have mentors. But I remember there came a moment where I realized I am so easily triggered, hijacked. I call it, we get into the kind of internal posture of pinballing, just bouncing off all the triggers, trying to stay out of the gutter. And what I didn't realize is how in those moments when the worst version of me jumped into the driver's seat and took over, and I found myself saying, doing, responding, reacting in ways that were unhelpful. For a long time, it was so much easier just to blame everybody else for those moments. And when I woke up, like I shared earlier, to this realization of like, actually, I don't get to blame anybody else for why I said that, or why I responded this way, or why I sent the email with that tone, or why I did not respond via text because I'm upset with that person, or whatever the case is. The way I talked about some difficult conversation and I sounded arrogant or proud, or I withheld information because I'm trying to one up somebody. All those just kind of really unhelpful ways of operating. Here's what I didn't know how to do. In my best moments, when everything was going my way, I felt like I could bring a better version of myself to those situations. But as soon as you put me under enough pressure, I cracked. And I defaulted to the victim or villain mindset. I defaulted to fight or flight postures. I defaulted to self-protection, self-preservation, and all of that in this attempt to preserve this very fragile, really, if I'm honest, this really fragile view of myself that was so dependent on my external environment. And that's a whole other conversation to get into.
Yeah,
but
I feel like you're talking to a ton of high achievers out there, right? If we're not achieving and if we're not winning, then who are we?
then there it is. So then I flipped the question. Well, what would it look like for me to be able to bring the better version of myself more often, and let's add this little extra bit, and especially under increasing pressure? Because the older I got, the more responsibilities, the more opportunity. Guess what? More pressure.
Yeah.
I tell people, the higher you go, everyone thinks, well, if I just make it to the VP level, I just make it to the executive level, if I just make it to the manager level, then I'll make enough money and everything's going to be set. And I'm like, forget it. the higher you go in life in terms of role and responsibility, it doesn't matter if it's personal or professional,
Mhm.
the more influence you have in the lives of people, the more pressure, because
Always.
there's more at stake.
Mhm.
And so that was the question. Like I'm if I want to like lead at higher levels and influence in a really helpful way, then I've got to learn how to operate well under pressure. And I can tell you right now, at that point, I did not operate well under pressure. I buckled so quickly and so easily and thought I could get away with it, only to have a lot of feedback over a series of years in my life, like really become so overwhelming, letting me know you do not operate well under pressure. So I entered onto this journey, this personal journey of saying, okay, what does that look like? And I obviously, like many people, I read a lot and I learned a lot, and had a lot of great mentors, and eventually really fell in love with the conversation around emotional intelligence
Oh, yes. Mm.
and really appreciated it. But there was a glaring deficiency in the way it was being talked about at that time. Emotional intelligence at that time was, I think, overly focused on our emotion, which is a significant part of the conversation around emotional intelligence. But I think it's more than that, because as human beings, we are mental, emotional, and physical. And then if you want to add spiritual, you can do that as well. And so what I realize is, okay, I've got to learn how to under pressure operate well mentally, emotionally, and physically. Because once you tap into one of those areas, guess what? As an integrated creature, like who stubs their toe and isn't emotionally or mentally affected, or
So true.
who hears really great news and isn't impacted emotionally or physically,
Mhm.
right? So there's no way to touch one without touching the other. So I realized, okay, it's got to be more than emotion, it's got to be mental, emotional, and physical. And so I basically went on this journey of saying, okay, I love some of what I've learned from people like Daniel Goleman and others about emotional intelligence, but I want to expand the framework. And so that's what I did. I took the best of everything I learned from people much smarter than me and wiser than me, but really what worked for me, and said, what are the basic skills that I would need to practice and develop in that would allow me to operate well in any context under increasing pressure. And then that was just for me personally. And then over time, obviously, as I got into the work of coaching, I started sharing this with other folks, with clients, first with friends and people in my own community, but then eventually with clients. And everyone kept saying, Eric, where has this been? Where has this been? I've never had a simple framework in my brain that would give me clarity, focus, vision, and practical handles of what does it mean for me to bring the best version of myself to any situation under increasing pressure. And what's amazing is I kept thinking, well, we're eventually going to run into people for whom they're going to say, well, this is not the kind of person I want to be. This is not a vision for the kind of leader I want to be, or how the kind of culture we want to create. And what's amazing with the what we call the EQ matrix that we've developed in here, which again is borrowed and innovated on, is I've never run into a leader, and I mean, we work across every industry, every context, and I can tell you, I've never run into a leader who said, you know what, Eric, that doesn't paint a picture of the kind
Mhm.
of leader that I would love to grow into, or the culture that I would love to fight for. And so we've just discovered it. It's like you said, these universal truths and principles about humanity really do transcend every context.
Man, just in thinking in your bio, you were talking about empowering the true engine of any business, the people. And
Yeah.
I love it so much. And I am such a huge proponent of emotional intelligence. As we take all of these individuals, right, their spiritual, physical, and emotional selves and all the things in between, and you put them together in a group, I mean, that's a lot of potential for a lot of chaos and conflict. And you have to know how to navigate that as a leader. So it's so
Yes.
important. And I love because the psychology behind that can be very complex. I love exactly what you were saying is you've made it simple. You've
Yeah.
made it simple to say, okay, how can we dive in and understand more about myself so that I know how to operate so I don't crack under pressure? Or,
Yes.
the thing is, the worst parts of you are going to be magnified in
That's
times
right.
of stress and chaos and
That's right.
pressure. Oh, I don't
Yeah.
want that happening and you don't either. But the way that you proactively grow out of that happening is through emotional intelligence. But I love it. The great part is it doesn't just affect you, it affects how you engage with others. And then what you're teaching others and showing others and bringing others together. It just makes everything better. It just makes it
Well,
better.
and it's interesting, what you just shared, um, in many ways points to why I refer to our leadership toolkit as a leadership operating system. As you said, you bring all these different people in an organization on any team, let alone marriage. And then you have kids, and it doesn't matter. Whenever there's more than one human being, you are going to have now a diversity of perspective, opinions, paradigms, beliefs, convictions, values, preferences. And all of that can lead to unhelpful or unnecessary chaos, conflict, confusion, frustration, battles, dysfunction. And that's what people experience. And so it's interesting. So think of it this way. If you go into any company, into one of their offices, and you say, oh, you all are using different software programs and different stuff to accomplish the tasks of your job, right? Like even if it's just basic email app or a word processing app or a spreadsheet app. Yeah, of course we do. Oh, okay. How many different operating systems do you use? And they'll say, well, I said, you have a variety of apps, correct? And some people use apps and other people don't, and vice versa, correct? Because different departments, different needs, different systems. Yes. How many different operating systems do you use? And they go, well, of course we use one. Of course we use one operating. It's Apple, it's Microsoft, it's Linux, it's whatever people are using. And I said, well, why is that? And I said, because the operating system is what determines all of these different computing devices' ability to interact, communicate, to collaborate. That's what allows the networking to happen. I said, yes. And so for us as people, where I tell people, I say, listen, we need because the psychology of what we're talking about is incredibly complex. And so the way to resolve complexity is not greater complexity, it's simplicity. So all we've done is taken this simple analogy and say, yeah, if we want people to operate more effectively together and not to get their communication crossed and not to have unnecessary conflict and not to have unnecessary battles for resources and time and energy, which is that's what an operating system's job is to govern and manage how all of these different apps are playing simultaneously to accomplish what you want your smartphone or computer or iPad to accomplish. In the same way, we need a unified and clear leadership operating system that we can download into our team or our organization or our division that has the effect of helping to govern how we operate together so that we can communicate effectively, resolve conflict, mitigate against unnecessary errors, brainstorm, collaborate, creatively problem solve, all the wonderful things that we so badly want to do in our businesses, but is upended because leaders are not paying attention to the fact that most of the people in their team or organization are literally running different operating systems.
Yes, I love it. There was such a nugget of wisdom. The answer to the challenge of complexity is not more complexity, it's simplicity. And I love how you've gone about that through your coaching business, through your books, through your operating system that you've created. It's making the complex simple. And I think that people that understand the complex things the best are the ones that can explain it in the most simple of ways.
Yes.
That's so beautiful. So good. So as we kind of wrap up, what are some key takeaways for our listeners that we need to apply and grow in our leadership? Because you've shared so much wisdom with us. So what are some key takeaways?
First of all, if you're struggling as a leader in any way, shape, or form, my encouragement is welcome to the party. It doesn't matter how long you've been in any leadership role. It's important to remember we're all leaders because we all have influence and impact in the lives of people around us. And it's a lifelong experience and journey. And so my encouragement is for people to keep doing the work. We never arrive. We never kind of get to a place where we go, oh, well, I've learned everything I need to learn about this kind of responsibility in my life. But to know that you're not alone. And the people who act or look like they have it together most, I can assure people, I work with some of those people behind the scenes, they do not. They are struggling. They are dealing with imposter syndrome, insecurities. They are right now, as they look amazing on Instagram or social media, they are battling some of their greatest demons, personal demons, or trying to overcome incredible obstacles in their business, their life, their relationships. So that's number one. That's an important takeaway. We're all in the same boat, and we gotta make sure we don't think we're alone or the only people dealing with a particular struggle. The second thing is that everything in life changes for the better when we wake up to the fact that the only thing that we can and are responsible to be in control of is our attitudes and our behaviors, the way that we understand ourselves, the world, and how we engage and respond to the world. That is literally, I tell people that if you're feeling stuck in any area of your life, 99.99999% of the time, that is the key that will unlock the breakthrough that you're looking for. And then one more simple takeaway would be that, I'm gonna just make sure I say this well. Don't wait until you have a leadership role or title in an organization to take seriously the fact that leadership is a lifestyle and it is a human responsibility, because leadership is influence and impact. And how we impact the people we're driving next to on the freeway, guess what? That's leadership. The way we handle the Starbucks barista who messed up our order, that's leadership. The way that we engage with the homeless person, that's leadership. The way that we engage with anybody, any human being at any time and anywhere, is actually an expression of leadership. And I think we've done ourselves an incredible disservice in our culture because we primarily think of leadership as role title in an organization.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, you've given me so much to think about. Number one, I love just the realization you're not alone. All the feelings that you're feeling, all the stress that you're feeling, you're not alone. Two, change starts with you. It always starts with you, and it's an internal change first, and then it'll come out to be an external change. And then third, it's all connected. Everywhere you go, you take you with you. So lead well, my friend, lead well. It's so good. So in thinking of kind of the opposite, what is one poor decision you would warn our leaders to avoid? Like, don't do this. You're better than that.
Oh my gosh, I can think of 10 off the top of my head. Well, because, I've been doing this for enough years that you kind of see the same old, but even though we're all come from different backgrounds, we're human. So we all make very similar mistakes when it boils down to it. One thing not to do. Okay, I'm going to say this phrase and it's going to sound so cheesy. I remember saying it when I was younger, but it's so good. Don't blow out other people's candles to make yours shine brighter. It's such a cheesy phrase, I know, and I'm sorry to your listeners, but it's so good. Like, stop putting everybody else down. Stop being critical of everybody. Stop worrying about everybody else as some attempt to make you feel better about yourself. Get on with the business of becoming the better version of you. And the more you focus on that, guess what? The other stuff won't matter.
That is so, so good, and such a great visual that we need, right? We're visual thinkers and learners. So good. I love it. So, Eric, where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your work? Where can they go to get your books?
Yeah, great question. The easy place to go, obviously, Empower Coaching, MPWR is the word empower without the vowels. Empower Coaching, MPWR Coaching, we're on all the socials. They can find us that very easily. But really, our website, which is, mpwrcoaching.com. We have, that's the hub where they can get to all of our socials, our resources. And most importantly, honestly, Bethany, and I tell people, please take us up on this offer. We offer a free 1-hour coaching call. And we tell people, you don't even need to know why you're calling. You don't even know what to talk about in the call. We'll ask you all the questions we need to ask you. But I tell people, if you have any interest, if you've been provoked by anything you've heard me say on this podcast or in a book I've written or whatever our team has put out there, we want to have a conversation. And it's not because we want to sell anything from our website or our team, but because people need to know they're not alone in this. And so if we can point them towards some other resource or point them towards some other coaching organization or some other opportunity to help them move the needle in their life, people need a safe place to be on this journey, and we'd love to be that for them.
Oh, I love it. And guys, I'll have links to everything on the website, including that free coaching call link so you can schedule that with them. It's so needed. You are not alone. Talk to people and share and have a mentor, have a coach. It's so important. Eric, thank you so much for being here and sharing just all of your wisdom and leadership and everything that you gave us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Bethany. Those were great questions you asked, by the way.
Thank you. So, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. And today's Bible verse comes from Acts chapter 8, verse 4. Now those who were scattered went about preaching the word. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you're enjoying the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss a single episode. Also, be sure to rate the show. We hope to earn 5 stars in serving you in leadership, and through your ratings, it'll help us get the word out about what we do here at Leadership on the Rocks. If you feel this podcast is helpful, be sure to share it with your friends, family, and coworkers, or anyone who wants to grow in leadership, but also have harmony between their work and home life. Thanks, and I'll see you again in the next episode.